Good afternoon, everyone. This is session 3, risk-taking, the good, the bad, and the downright awesome. So hopefully you guys are in the right session. So my name is Anil Carmel. I am one of the co-moderators. I'm joined with my partner in crime, Annette Philanabel. Good afternoon. And we have a great lineup of speakers here for you. Allow me to introduce you to James Ellis, the Director of Office of Survey Support and Application Management, USEIA. Jeremy Grant, the Senior Executive Advisor for Identity Management for a National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace. We have Dennis Albert, the Executive Director of Business USA. And we have Martha Doris, the Deputy Associate Administrator of Office of Citizen and Services and Innovative Technologies, USA. So, can we have a round of applause for our... All right, so we're going to do a quick recap of the first 2 sessions. So we promised you here at MOC that every session builds upon itself, and each session is a little different than what a typical speaking conference would be. So the first session, we talked about risks, and we talked about failing fast, right? So when we had that conversation of risk-taking being risky business, right, what came out of that conversation was really, you need to have strong leadership, you need to have strong partnerships, and you need to be able to deliver programs and applications quickly, not 2-year, 3-year programs, but rather quick cycles of innovation. In the second session, we talked about innovation and acquisition at odds in a very unconference style where our speakers joined the audience and the audience became the panel. So a very different conversation that allowed us to have a very interactive dialogue around how acquisitions are structured, what are the challenges on the industry side, what are the challenges on the government side, and it all boiled down to we need to change our culture, wherein government doesn't need to be the police in terms of trying to ensure that industry has good behavior through very strict procurements, but rather industry and government working together to change the culture to allow us to innovate together. Which brings us to session 3, which is risk-taking, the good, the bad, and the downright awesome. So we are here to have a very different conversation. So in that vein, we have in the vein of slightly different, we have some poll questions to ask you. So we're going to ask you to do something that we normally wouldn't do, which is pull out all your phones. So we're going to ask all of you to bring your phones out, and we're going to ask you guys some questions first, and then we're going to ask the panelists a series of questions. So with that, we're going to ask you to text some questions or text the answers to the questions on the side, and then at the end, we're going to ask our panelists their thoughts in a very family feud style. That will be your Steve Harvey of sorts, if you like. So with that, who should be held accountable when taking a risk? Text 22333. Answer 1, government should be the thought leaders and hold the risk. And that's the number that you text if you believe that's the case. Industry should take the opportunity to push the needle in government and hold the risk. Government and industry should partner and share the risk. Risk, isn't that a board game? So text what you believe to be the appropriate response for you, and then our esteemed panelists will congregate family feud style and come up with their final answer near the end of this session.
And for those that get charged by the text that would rather not do so, you can go to pollev.com/MOC-risk, and you'll see the poll questions come up right there where you can answer them. There's about 5-6 of them that you'll be able to answer in just a minute.
Exactly. So, and we'll do the reveal at the end of the session. So with that, has everyone got their answers locked in? Yes? Okay, we're going to flip to the next question. What are the benefits of risk-taking? Text the same code, 22333, with the number that relates to your answer. Answer 1, rapid adoption of innovative technology to provide new services to constituents. Ability to try new things quickly and see what works. Opportunity to completely change the game and accelerate careers. Or learn new things from both sides of the table. So pick the answer that makes the most sense to you. Pick one answer. So we'll give you another 20 seconds or so to lock in your answer. And can everyone see the numbers? Do I need to read any of the numbers or the answers again? All right, so with that, we're going to move to the next question. What are some disadvantages of risk taking? Again, the number of your text is 22333. Number one, it's a waste of time and resources. Careers can be put in jeopardy. It's like Vegas, roll the dice and you'll lose big. So text your answer. Now we're getting lots of results. We're at 15 results so far. 19, 20. Give you another 10, 15 seconds. We're at 26 results. 27. Give another 5 seconds and we'll flip to the next question. All right, next question. What are some ways to take a risk? Same code. Government should tell industry what it wants. Industry should just bring new solutions to the table. Adopt a startup mentality in government. Or change processes to make risk-taking easier. So typically in Family Feud, they ask the audience these questions before Family Feud begins. Since we're basically doing that in this case, we're asking you before the audience rolls in to ask these questions. So we're at about 20, 22. And we'll actually play the game right at the end of this.
Richard Dawson.
No, Steve Harvey. I'll play the Steve Harvey card.
Mark is running registration. Yes, sir.
No, I have to give the Steve Harvey look right at it.
Richard Dawson would have to look this a lot.
Yeah. All right, we're up to about 30 responses on this. Another 5 seconds and we'll flip to the next questions. All right, let's go to the next question. Security concerns get in the way of innovation adoption. What security concerns? Let me ask my CISO. Wait, is that Godzilla? Bring down the firewalls and share everything. For those of you that haven't seen Godzilla, go to the movie theaters. Godzilla's in the theaters this weekend. I believe we're almost at the end of our questions. Okay, we have just one more, if that. Yep, we got one more question. So we'll give it another couple seconds. And you guys start thinking about your answers to this because we're going to play this game in a bit. So. All right, with that, let's go to the last question. Risk-taking and innovation is not encouraged in the federal government. Answer one, isn't that what DARPA is for? We love proof of concepts to try new things. Let's put an RFI out and see what vendors have to say. It's not worth putting my career on the line. So I had one little caveat when we're talking about risk. We're talking about big risks, not your day-to-day operational risk, but kind of the big risk, project risks, or big program risks. Not like your day-to-day, I'm going to do my job and I, risk of one thing or another. This is kind of the bigger picture of risk. So with that, we'll put that up for another 5 seconds, and then we're going to ask our esteemed speakers here a question that they can answer from their perspective of risk. So with that, we'll spend another 5 seconds, and then we'll flip over to some questions. All right, so with that, your answers are now locked in. We will do the reveal at the end of the session in true Family Feud style. So with that, James, based on your past experience, how has your approach to risk-taking evolved?
Oh, boy. Well, it's evolved, and it's evolved quickly. I would say the biggest thing that we began to focus on, and I focused on, has been communication. I was in a couple of other sessions earlier today, and we talked a lot about when can we communicate with industry, when can we communicate with procurement. And one of the things that I've learned is the more I communicated, and in the interval in which I communicated, started to reduce my risk dramatically. Talking about our goals, our objectives, our outcomes, what we were trying to do, going back to the drawing board, rethinking those initial assumptions has been key to really our success. So over the years, I used to go out and I used to go in and I'd say, okay, let's deliver this, let's get a good return, let's, catch the world on fire. But then I started to say, well, let me go out and talk to people. Let me kind of do some best practice sharing with industry. Let me talk to other government agencies. So I would say the biggest thing that really changed me in the whole risk concept was communicating. And the more I did that, and the more frequency that I did that, I got better ideas. I got to my deliverables a whole lot quicker. I eliminated a lot of potholes, some that I fell into, but I eliminated a lot as well. So I would have to say, and I like to keep it short, communicate, and I know it's going to sound like a cliche, but communicate, but also go back and talk to those folks that you communicated earlier to once you've gone through a cycle and say, okay, this is what I've come up with, now what do you think from here? So that's really changed. What I've been trying to do over the last 4 or 5 years is really get that communication out there. And the more we can talk, the better we get and the faster we can deliver.
Thank you, James. Any questions for James before we move on to our next speaker and their thoughts? No? Quiet audience. Big lunch?
Have you found all of the audiences to which you reached out responsive, or have you had any issues where people were unwilling to communicate? And how did you deal with that?
Oh, wow. I would say probably 75% of the time everybody was pretty responsive. But in any bureaucracy, you got to find out really what's driving the other organizations. I'll give you an example of one. While I was at DOD, I had a very good communication relationship with my acquisition department. So I understood their strategies, I understood what they were trying to deliver, they understood what my program was trying to deliver. It really worked out very, very well. I'm just talking about the acquisition community. At another agency, which I won't name, we don't really have that relationship, or we haven't had that relationship. So we're pretty much at every turn competing with each other. We don't really understand, I'm on the program office side now, so they don't really understand the deliverables that I'm trying to make. I don't really understand the acquisition strategies that they may have in place at that particular time. So it's a constant battle. That leads me back to, you gotta sit down, get everybody on the same side of the table, communicate out what you're trying to do, and hopefully come to some agreement before you bring industry in. I think the government has to get its shop in order first so that we can go out and really get good requirements, good deliverables, and they're realistic. That's probably been the biggest challenge and activity for me.
Thank you. All right. Yes.
Have you ever been burned by conversations with industry?
Yes.
Sorry.
No. That's a good question because that's a risk.
Yeah.
When you're talking to industry, you're talking about things that are have not been brought to fruition yet. Some things you never give away any confidential information, but there are some things out there that you don't want to say. But if you don't, you have to really you have to dance in the gray area, as I always say. You have to take it to a point where they really understand your objectives, your goals, and what you're trying to do. And sometimes you're going to get burned. But more times than not, I don't. Because I try to have a good relationship with those industry partners that we bring in to where we can basically sit down and say, here's my problem. Let's talk about the problem and not so much about what you're going to give me. This is what we need to solve. So I've kind of, over the years, know when to shut up. And I think I've done it pretty well. So I'll stop with that.
Cool, thank you, James. All right, so we're going to move on to our next speaker. Jeremy, if you would be so kind to answer, what risks are you taking right now and how's it going?
Sure. So, as background to the risk we're taking and why we're taking them, the program I run is trying to solve a few different small problems. More than 740 million online records were exposed last year, which was the worst year for data breaches in history. 76% of these breaches were executed by taking advantage of the weaknesses of passwords. Passwords is basically the single biggest problem out there when it comes to bad security. As a consequence, we saw 13.1 million consumers suffering identity theft last year. That's the second highest number on record. And fraudsters stole more than 18 billion from consumers. So against this backdrop, the administration, the president 3 years ago signed this thing called the National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace, or NSIC as it's known, one of the catchier acronyms in government. And for a problem of this size and scope, to solve it, we don't have legislation, we don't have regulation, we don't even have an executive order, we have a strategy, which is something that's signed by a rather influential person but doesn't actually force a lot of activity. And for a cybersecurity problem of this size and scope, again, something that costs 76% of breaches, the administration requested an annual budget of $24 million and change, against a backdrop of total federal cybersecurity spending that's over $13 billion. And Congress gave us 2/3 of that, or about $16 million. So coming into this, right off the bat, there's really no way that you can actually make any progress in tackling a problem of this magnitude without taking some risks. It was very important that we looked, as we were figuring out how to tackle this, to do so looking against the backdrop of several other failed efforts around identity and authentication over the last dozen years. It was really evident from the start that we had to take a bit of a different approach. So a key part of our implementation plan, where we've taken a lot of risks, has been funding innovative pilot projects in partnership with the private sector that can quickly translate the ideas in the strategy that the president signed into real-world implementations. Doing these pilots required that we be willing to experiment from the start. We understood if we actually picked the lowest risk pilots, we had an applicant pool for the first round of more than 180 applicants, we certainly had some choices. We wouldn't really be doing our jobs or doing anybody in the country any favors. So we made a point of picking pilots that balanced risk with the most upside. Over the long term, that should get us much better results. But we also understood from the start that taking this approach wouldn't be particularly easier, that we might get knocked from time to time. After my staff, when we launched the pilots, had some concerns, kept coming into my office, I wiped out the first half of my whiteboard and wrote on the top of it, some pilots may fail, and this is okay. It's something we keep coming back to time and time again, because if every pilot succeeded, we probably picked the wrong ones. We've actually had some really good successes, but also a couple that have not been outright failures, if we struggled enough that not everybody's happy with them. So one risk that we run into the last month with taking risk is that you might lose the confidence of those who fund you. The House Appropriations Committee, or the CJS subcommittee earlier this month, recommended to cut our all-over budget for fiscal year 15 by $10.6 million, which is the exact number that we plan to spend on pilots in FY15. Cited in what they called in the report as a lack of progress associated with the pilots funded thus far. Jason, you haven't written the story yet, so let's talk before you do. Prompted. I don't agree with the characterization from the committee, and we're taking some steps to point out what has really been some great progress to date. But I'm also not here today to pick on them or single them out. I only highlight what happened as a peril of taking risks and trying to do something in government that's a little bit different. These are pilots that, the initial round is a 24-month period of performance. We're 19 months in, so yes, they haven't accomplished everything that they were supposed to, but we actually feel good about what most of them have done. And we could have chosen some lower risk, more basic pilots and achieved less, gone for the easy layup, but we didn't go for the half-board shot, we went for the three-pointer, because that offered the most upside, and now we have a little work to do on that. So, in our office, we don't have regrets about the way we approached it. I'm pretty optimistic in the end we'll be able to continue our efforts. But it certainly was a harsh reminder of some of the perils you face when you do take a more risky strategy for a program's implementation.
Excellent, thank you, Jeremy, appreciate that. Do we have any questions for Jeremy around risks? Gotta have 8 questions. Come on, let's have one. There we go.
So, Jeremy, Rob Michael from DOE, and my question for you is, as you're doing these pilots, and we can go down the road and talk agile, but government's not ready for agile, we know that. I'll talk loudly. So, but the net is how are you building requirements for a limited risk exposure pilot, preparing to fail, because that's the point, right? You want to be able to fail often, fail quickly, and move on. So how are you building requirements sufficient to do procurement, to do contracting, such that leadership, you or the politicals above you that live in the unrealistic reality of political roles, understand what you're doing and don't come back and go, stop doing that, it doesn't work for my political reality. So.
Sure, good question. A few parts to that answer. One, we didn't go through contracting, these were all through grants.
Got it.
And NIST, I won't talk about our contracting shop, but our grants office is outstanding in terms of an organization to partner with who's willing to sit down, understand what outcomes you're looking to achieve, work with you on creative ways to achieve them, be willing to take some risks themselves. There's been a number of times items have come up and we've looked at it and said, is this in the interest of the government? Yes. Is it illegal or prohibited in any way? No. Let's try this thing, it should work. The pilots themselves, this is not a typical government IT program. We are doing some pilots in the government as well when I talked about the Federal Cloud Credential Exchange, which is sort of the government's implementation of NSTIC. But most of these are really focused on completely private sector solutions, being deployed, built with almost no touch to the government at all. And so rather than describe specific requirements, what we really talked about was outcomes and problems that we saw in the marketplace. The reason we have all these problems with passwords, the reason we still haven't gotten to any replacement, is not that there aren't really neat solutions that are out there you can use instead of a password. It's that there's a bunch of barriers that are out there around interoperability, usability, liability, privacy that the market has for years tried to overcome on its own and failed. So we actually made the focus of our federal funding opportunity those barriers and a few others, and said these are the problems that we have in the marketplace, and we want to see some innovative teams come together with ideas to try to address them, and hopefully in smashing through one of the barriers, they can put a foundation in place that you can build this broader marketplace of identity solutions off of. So we, I think, did a really good job communicating with our stakeholders, including the Hill, but that doesn't mean that everybody had the same patience in terms of, or set of expectations for that matter in terms of what is considered progress.
Fantastic. Other questions for Jeremy? Other questions? All right. We're going to then thank you again, Jeremy, for your comments. We're going to move to David. David, what are the obstacles? Oh, Dennis, I'm sorry. It says David. Sorry, Dennis.
David is my father, so.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, apologies. Have you ever taken a risk and not achieved the expected results? And what happened next?
Well, so I run what is essentially a government startup and take risks every single day. And believe it or not, they don't all work out as planned. I know it's going to be shocking. Even in government, where we tend to plan things out well in advance and have the exact outcome in mind that we're aiming for, not everything works out as planned. But I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think in government, we really do need to be willing to take risks and acknowledge that it's not all going to work out as planned. As Jeremy said, you write on your board, not everything is going to work. And if you accept that at the onset, it can actually be a tool that you can use to your advantage. And I think one of the things that we've found in standing up the Business USA initiative is that we're not afraid to maybe get out a little bit in front of something and try something new. And if it doesn't work out perfectly the first time, to continue to iterate and innovate on that thing and improve it and build it and make it better. There have been numerous instances where, in responding to customer demands, we have moved aggressively forward to bring a new product to the marketplace. And that product is not always perfect the day that you launch it, believe it or not. But it really provides us with a great opportunity to then go back to the customer and say, hey, what did you like about this product? What didn't you like about this product? How can we make the next iteration better? And in many instances, we've been able to rinse, wash, repeat, and keep improving and keep innovating on top of that product. So I guess what I learned, and it sounds a little bit cliche, is that don't let it get you down and keep trying again until you get it right. And government can be creative and innovative.
Appreciate that. Any questions or thoughts on that topic?
So I've had the opportunity of meeting Dennis and talking about Business USA a couple of times now because they were one of the Dynamite winners for Igniting Innovation this year. And one of the things that came out that was important to their innovation event opportunity was that it was, presidential directive. You're going to do this. So Dennis's team had a lot of pressure, support, call it what you want, from the leadership. But when we talked with some of the other folks about innovation, they said that there were a lot of issues with starting something from the bottom up. And so I was wondering if Dennis and others could talk about, what happens when you're, in the trenches trying to start an innovation versus the challenges that still go with starting something with, strength from the top.
Sarah, I think you raised a couple of really important points there. When Business USA was launched, and I often mention this, the president was kind enough to give us 90 days to stand up his new product. Well, that in and of itself presented some unique challenges within the government. We had nothing in place. We had no staff, no budget, no contracting, really nothing. So from the ground up, we went from the ground up to 90 days to an initial web product and presence. So we had to leverage very, very heavily off existing institutional infrastructure in order to accomplish that goal. And we worked very closely with our partners at GSA and across the federal community to stand up the initial product. And then we continued to build on that and innovate it today. So it does help, I think, sometimes to have kind of a high-level impetus to get something done quickly. And we knew that that first product was not going to be perfect. And we're now on actually the third generation of that web portal 2 years later, because we've continued to innovate. Well, at the same time, I think building something new from the bottom up also comes with a lot of inherent challenges and risks. And Lena, where you are, we were talking about building something new a few moments ago. And building that, you almost have to build that core operational infrastructure and get your policies and procedures and things in place so that you can move through the mechanics of government, and we do have a very defined way of doing business, but at the same time continue to be creative and continue to be innovative. So to some degree you need to put the policies and procedures in place that are going to allow you to be successful, but not let that stymie your innovation and creativity, and not let that scare you away from taking away risks that are going to actually help you to produce the products and services that the customers want that are going to make you successful.
Following up on what Dennis was talking about, N6 very similar in that it was a presidential initiative and a startup where I was the one employee who had to build a team and find office space and all of those fun things. They were fun, actually, the first 6 months. But I think as we're talking about risk, one of the things that gave me the confidence in our approach was we knew we had the backing of the big guy. And frankly, it was the only reason I took the job was, if this wasn't something that rose to the level of being a White House initiative, it probably wouldn't have stood a chance. It's just too complicated a set of issues to make much progress on. Knowing that you had the backing, from the White House and the ability to get their, not only they're bugging you from time to time, hey, where's this and where's that, but also to be very constructive in helping to actually provide the air cover to do the things you wanted to do has been absolutely essential to our office taking some of the risks that we've taken.
So Dennis is actually a customer of ours, and I think that having the presidential, mandate to put Business USA into production, we had a long history in our office in citizen services and innovative technologies for integrated service delivery to the public. So we had the infrastructure he's talking about. Agenda was involved in standing up the initial set, the website. The call center that's used is the 1-800-FED-INFO call number that we have. So our team has worked very closely with all the agencies as part of Business USA to stand up that kind of integrated service delivery to the business community based on the relationship and the experience that we have on the citizen side, which is great because it's an example of how agencies share solutions, which is what we're all about. We're all about creating a solution, sharing it with other agencies so that they can take advantage and leverage what we do. Tammy talked this morning about challenge.gov. That's also in our office. So we set up government platforms to help save other agencies time, money, and lessons learned in terms of making those things happen. And Sarah, your comment about, what happens when you have somebody at the bottom or in the workforce that wants to try new things. I think in our office, we have created an environment where we are open to hearing those kinds of ideas. And so anywhere from things like when social media started and we created a URL shortener to shorten like a Go USA so that every government URL is shortened so it has usa.gov in the shortened URL, to creating and negotiating terms of service agreements for federal-friendly terms of service so that other agencies can use social media. So I think it's about an environment that you kind of create. I mean, we definitely have top leadership from Dave, you know, at his level, but all the way up to Dan, since he's been here, that really is encouraging us to be innovative and creative and actually beating loosely term, you know, for us to use the innovative ideas and solutions we have in our office across all of GSA. So that's a lot of what we do is, you know, knock on doors across GSA to get them to not just for us to help, you know, other agencies, but for us to actually help GSA as well. So I think it's definitely an environment. There's a lot of pieces to that.
Which is a great segue to your question. Which is, how are you encouraging risk-taking with a rural college?
Well, I just answered that. So I think our office is a very unique, it's very small in GSA terms. We're less than 100 people. And we've been in the business of doing these kind of small, innovative things for a long time. And in some, you know, in some of the terms that you guys are dealing with large major systems, it seems small, but what we try to do is accelerate the adoption of new technologies across government. So what we'll do is we will identify, I mean, we were very involved in the implementation of the digital government strategy as an example. And so you've got a mandate, a policy, a strategy out there. And then we looked at what are the things that you need to, that are barriers to the adoption of mobile, APIs, open data. And then we start trying to identify and create those kind of products to help accelerate that within agencies. One of the things that we do a lot of is communities of practice. So I was talking to Sarah earlier about sharing innovations across the government. So we have communities of practice in the challenges space, in the mobile space, in the social media space, in the web manager space, in the contact leader space. So what we do is we've got listservs in all of those environments, and if anybody wants to know what somebody else is doing across the government, they just throw a question out there, and they're all very, very active listservs that they help each other across government in identifying those things. So we also a lot of what is a challenge to the implementation of the digital government strategy is just education and awareness of what these terms mean. The programs out there, you know, we've got in the IT community, they know, okay, what are the security risks in the mobile area? What does an API mean? What is, you know, what's the value of it? But in the program offices, they don't necessarily understand all of that. So we have Digital Government University where we really try to break down the learning curve and like share the knowledge across government. So we work at many different levels. I mean, so knowing that we're kind of in the forefront of bringing those technologies and those concepts to the rest of the government, we work within our office, and then we try to work across government in these many areas. And Tammy mentioned digitalgov.gov, which is where we kind of put all of our resources and the ability to share in those communities of practice. So we're always learning from everybody else across the government too, which is a great thing. And then just continue to learn from the communities of practice and our customers, because our office is kind of at the forefront of a customer experience program. So we try to learn from our customers and continue to kind of accelerate that adoption. So.
Very cool. So any questions for Martha before we play Family Feud?
Let's play.
No questions? Okay, yes.
Quick question. If you could have Federal Express or DuPont or Fortune 100 CIO, CXO in here. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't see that. What question would you ask them? What would you like to know from the commercial side in terms of innovation that would be useful to the challenges you're facing? Thank you.
So I can start. So I'm a big proponent of this customer service concept, which I think is, and we heard last night from the Department of Labor about the issue there. I think that, you know, the public, businesses, you know, people working in the government, all of us deserve to get the kind of service and have that kind of experience in interacting with the government. And I think that the government could learn a lot from the way the private sector does customer service. I think that it's given a little bit of a short shrift because it sounds like, it's the Sears, repairman coming, but it really drives everything, or should drive everything within an organization. It drives the kind of people you hire, the service, the way you measure service, the way you measure it, innovation. What kind of products do you have? Do they meet the customer's expectations? How do you iterate and improve those products? So it kind of permeates to me every single thing that you do, and I would love to understand that.
I could add one quick point on that as well, and I agree with everything Martha said, of course. I couldn't agree with you more. I think we're talking a lot in the federal government-wide about how we can up our game in the customer service space, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from the private sector. I also think on the technology side, there's a lot that we can learn from the private sector, and if I were to be so fortunate to sit in the room with some of the leading technology CEOs, I would love to pick their brains about how they think we can apply some of the innovations from the private sector to the public sector. And in fact, we've had some success doing that at Business USA. I think some of our greatest success, quite frankly, have been where we've looked at a successful practice from the private sector, and for the first time, we've applied it to a public sector challenge or problem. And I'll give you one quick example. One of the things that we've tried to do with Business USA, there are literally thousands of programs, products, services, data, information that can help businesses and entrepreneurs from across the federal landscape. We try to get that information in a more streamlined manner to our customers in a way that they're used to consuming it. Well, think a little bit about how you transact in the private sector when you go to Amazon or iTunes or Zappos or other. They make it very easy for you to identify what you're looking for and get that thing. In the government, we haven't done that. We've made it very difficult. We're siloed, we can be fragmented, we can be difficult to understand. Business USA has tried to distill it down to the exact nugget of information that's going to be beneficial to the client. And we've tried to use for the first time some of those same best practices. So when you go to Amazon and they say, oh, you're buying a stereo receiver, you might also like to look at stereo wire and stereo speakers. Well, we, for the first time, can do that with Business USA. You come and you're looking for a loan guarantee program. Well, you might want to look at XM's loan guarantee program, USDA's loan guarantee program, and these other complementary services from across the government. There's no reason that we can't apply the same innovations from the private sector to the public sector. I would love to sit down with some CEOs and talk to them about how we can do that. So you go ahead.
I would say I did have the opportunity to do that, and that opportunity came with, I wouldn't say a lot of the Fortune 100 companies, but it was like 3 or 4. And the main question I asked was, how do they deal with failure? Because all of our failures are highly publicized. When you fail in private industry, okay, if you know the individual, they may be here today, going tomorrow, but for the most part, you don't hear a lot about how they deal with those failures. So one of the things that I was part of we would call it think tank, but a group session where we talked about how can they best deal with failure. And one of the things that I got out of that entire session was they don't. They really don't. We think we have it bad with dealing with failure. They really don't do it any better than we do. It's either masked with additional funding or it's with changing strategic direction, but they really are just answering to the shareholders, which is it's a difficult group to deal with. When you're having to deal with the general public, it's even more of a task. So in sitting down and talking to them, the biggest thing that I took away from that session was failure is something that happens across the board. Nonprofits, government, private industry, none of us do it well. But what I found though was if you had the willingness to talk about it and share the experience, you can kind of get through it a lot faster, a lot quicker. One thing I got out of that session was, hey, you need to talk to a lot of people, ask a lot of questions, bring a lot of folks in so you don't fail as big as you normally would have done in the past. So I thought it was a great session, something that I would do again. But failure is tough around the board. No one wants to talk about it, no one likes it, and we're just a little bit more publicized about our failures than just about anyone else.
Jeremy, have a closing thought?
Real quick, I was going to say, I'd love to understand how they integrate their acquisition function with companies. Some of what, when you start to look at the private sector and the interplay between not just IT and acquisition, but the whole company and acquisition. You talk to some companies who've got as many problems as we have here in the government, and you have some that really treat them as a strategic asset and, find ways to leverage them early and often in the process and do some really great innovative things in terms of how they purchase. And it's something, given our continued woes in the government, we can probably learn a lot from.
One thought I had while you were speaking about failures was, having good metrics early on from when you start in pilot so that you know what criteria by which you're going to make that decision, whether you're going to pull the plug or not, and being honest about what those results are and then not letting it get out of control. And so not letting it get so big that it becomes something that you have to worry about. I mean, we have metrics commitments to Dan, and we do a lot of pilots, and some of the metrics that we put in place are, we're going to go out based on customer feedback. Is it easy? What's the return on investment? And were you able to actually accomplish your task? Did it meet the mission that you were trying to do? And from those 3 questions, then we're going to decide, should we continue that pilot or should it stop?
Very fair. So actually, we're going to hold the follow-on question because we want to make time. We have about half an hour left to actually play the game. So with that, appreciate the question. Appreciate our speakers and panelists. So with that, I'm going to ask you guys to come up with a family name. So what's your family name? And take a risk.
Innovative.
Yeah, I have risk takers.
Risky business.
Risky business. All right, so you guys are going to be in the studio audience, right? So which means I'm going to expect a lot of loud participation if they get the answers right. You got to cheer, applaud if they get the answers wrong. You got to give the collective awe, right? So with that, hold up, I do the walk-in with the right music, and since I'm going to play the host of Steve Harvey is all about flair, right? So I did not bring an appropriate pocket square. He's all about pocket square, so I'm going to bring a bit of tech flair to the conversation. So, see that in? Come on! Welcome to Family Feud. My name is Steve Harvey, and I'm here to welcome the Risky Business family. We have Dennis Alford, Jeremy Grant, you get lost going. So we asked our studio audience a couple questions. So we're going to start with you, James. So tell us a little bit about yourself, James.
Well, my name is James Ellis. I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah.
All right.
Go Cubs!
Yeah, go Cubs. I work for the Department of Energy, and I'm just happy to be here.
Now remember, this is Family Feud, so you got to keep it clean.
Okay.
Right? It's a family show. See, so we asked our studio audience who should be held accountable when taking the risk. So, Team Risky Business, 4 answers are on the board. What is your answer?
So we're supposed to confirm it?
No, because I'm going to ask each one of you one question, and the last one you're going to confirm. So,
Well, being the collaborative guy that I am, I'm going to say government and industry should partner and share the risk.
Good answer,
Government and industry should partner and share the risk. Survey says. Points on the board. James wins. So we're actually going to ask a follow-on question to keep the game fun. So why do you think government and industry should share the risk?
Well, because it's a partnership.
Yeah.
Neither side can do it alone. Like I said at the very beginning, we have to communicate, we have to solve the business problem. And typically, Each partner brings something different to the table. So that's why I think they should share the risk, share the reward, because we will share the reward. I understand that. I just think it is a partnership for success. I'm just a big believer in it.
Amen. Good answer. 20 points on the board. We're down to a family member here, Jeremy Grant. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm from Detroit. I like tigers, bourbon, and long walks on the beach.
Family. So with that, we asked our studio audience a question. What are the benefits of risk-taking? So you have 4 answers, and your answer is?
Well, I'm going to go with ability to try new things quickly and see what works.
Ability to try new things quickly and see what works.
Good answer. Good answer.
All right, so ability to try new things quickly and see what works. Survey says. Oh. All right, so why do you believe that the studio audience selected the other?
Well, probably because this is an ACT-IAC conference. And I think they're both good answers. I think trying things quickly and see what works, because if we don't get bogged down in defining requirements for 2 or 3 years, we can actually focus on doing a lot of things, including the item above. But I thought the second answer was a little broader in terms of the benefit of risk.
I think
Good answer. So no extra points on the board. Maybe give you 5 points for the recovery. They'll give you 25. So we're at 25. Team Risky Business. We're going to go to our next family member. Dennis, tell us a little about yourself.
My name is Dennis Allman. I'm originally from upstate New York. Really pleased to be here today. I was just actually walking by, and it sounded like you all are having fun. So
And we are having fun. We're all about doing it a little bit differently, right? Take a risk. So, next question we asked our illustrious studio audience, what are some disadvantages of risk-taking? You have 3 choices. Your answer is?
about 2 careers can be put in jeopardy.
Careers? Risky business.
he did first one.
Oh, see, that might explain something about family here.
Actually, no, I'm going on what the audience.
All the audience on TV, you already got the awe now. You already got it awe. So are you guys going back? You don't say good answer or no?
Good answer. Good answer. All right, good. We go together.
Okay, so families holding strong. So careers can be put in jeopardy. Survey says. Interesting answer, audience. So, tell us why you believe that's the case.
Well, I'm not sure that I actually believe that's the case. But I think there's a widely held perception that if you're too risky, you can put your career in jeopardy, whether you're in the public or the private sector. So I can completely understand why the audience fell down in this category. If I were to vote myself, I probably would have gone with the first item, although even that, I think, I think sometimes it's our role to step in and try something, and sometimes that takes resources to do, and we've got to take a risk sometimes in order to get to the right outcome.
Completely fair. So we're actually going to flip it to the studio audience because we have a...
So this is kind of like a trick question, because if you're a risk taker and an adventurer, like most of the people in this audience are, I think we see that these are all myths. We know that if you take risks, you're going to use time and resources, but it's an investment if you spin it the right way and you learn from it. We know that some of us who are willing to do this will put our necks on the line because we really believe in it. So putting our careers in jeopardy, also a myth. And then, you gotta play big, win big.
That's right.
So
I like that.
I think he did the right thing.
Put her on the team. Put her on the team.
We're all part of the same family. we're up to 50, right? So, all right, so with that, we will continue down the road. Martha, tell us a little bit about yourself.
This is the hardest question you've asked all day. So I am a 32-year veteran of GSA, so my entire federal career has been at GSA with a little break in the middle in the private sector. And I've been doing the citizen services work for almost 10 years. So what do I like to do? I like to bike ride, I like to play tennis, I like to drink wine.
Better life.
Either, depending on the time of day.
I guess we'll really find that answer out in a couple hours.
I
Right?
think Jason, you know that's off the record. Good.
There you go. So with that, we asked our studio audience, what are some ways to take a risk? We have 4 answers on the board, and your answer mark is...
Adopt a startup mentality in government.
Adopt a startup mentality in government. There we go. All right. So, what are some ways to take a risk? Adopt a startup mentality in government. Survey says... Oh. See? So our studio audience seems to disagree with Team Risky Business. So, what are your thoughts on that?
So we have both areas. I mean, in our office, we do have that startup mentality, and I think that's really helped us both on our side and on Lena's side. You heard Dennis talk about that. But I think, I can see there are many, many, many internal processes that make it very difficult for innovation. And I think it's across the board, all the standard HR, procurement, the financial stuff. So all of those need some tweaking. So I can see where the audience picked that one.
Gotcha. So, do we have an audience member that's willing to share their thoughts as to why they picked that? Yes.
So it seems like a very government answer to me, actually. Like, in the end, if you think about it, innovation fundamentally is disruptive, is against the rules. So changing the rules, is that really innovative in and of itself? Or is it going finding out how to use the rules in order to be able to have that innovation really more the answer the world's been looking for?
Okay, so we're all about changing the rules. So what should the rules change to look like?
Well, it's funny, actually, Dennis and I talked a little bit before the session, and we were sort of talking about there actually, and I think you mentioned it during part of your sort of initial discussion, that ultimately you have to learn how to utilize the processes. I don't think that changing them all the time. We had that in our earlier discussion about acquisitions. There's nothing really wrong with the FAR in and of itself. It's how you utilize the FAR that makes you effective or not effective in doing your job. Most government processes have got ways to get things done and to be innovative. We just don't utilize them properly.
So am I giving you 5 points? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. 23 if you want.
All right, so we're going to keep going down. How many more questions do we have?
We have 2, so we could have Showcase Showdown. Randy's got to pick 2 members just at the end.
All right.
They got to collaborate, figure out who they want to get up. So you have to pick 2 folks.
All right, Team Risky Business, pick 2 team members to play Showcase Showdown.
There you go, these 2. I'll take charge of here.
Who's coming up? We have Jeremy and Dennis. Is that who it is? Welcome, Jeremy and Dennis, to the Showcase Showdown. Come on. Jeremy and Dennis, we have 2 questions queued up for no money. So, security concerns get in the way of innovation adoption. 3 answers on the board. Elaborate. Your answer is...
Let me ask.
You got it. Talk amongst yourselves.
Change the rules. This is the government.
Let me ask my CISO.
Let me ask my CISO. Let me ask my CISO. Survey says.
All right.
Team Risky Business doubles their money. So with that, let me ask my CISO, why do you think the audience thought that?
Because it's an ACT-II conference and that's a logical.
I would say that I think we have seen some pretty high-profile security issues of late, so I think, most people recognize that security is a big issue that we have to address, and the process within the government for dealing that is the CISO process.
Comes back to process. Processes in government holding us back. Kavita has a thought.
It's a strategy, it's called risk transference. So you ask the CISO, it's his problem.
I think it does depend on who you're talking to in government, because there are certainly some of the Godzilla approaches too in some programs, which is interesting.
Very cool. So we've got one more question. Look at my time here. So do we have any audience thoughts? I see someone's trying to emulate Steve Harvey over here. We got Team Tangerine.
That's right. Team Tangerine versus Team Cotton.
That's right. So do we have any other audience thoughts? We got a little bit more time before we hit the last and final question on this topic. None. Okay. Last question. This is for all the marbles. You guys are at 100 points. Last question on the board. Risk-taking and innovation is not encouraged in the federal government. 4 answers are on the board. Collaborate. We're actually making this a team collaboration, so y'all family huddle up. Come on, cheer on.
Go!
Yeah. Final answer?
Yeah, proof concept, proof concept.
Proof of concept. We asked 31 audience members. Risk-taking and innovation is not encouraged in the federal government. Your answer was, we love proof of concepts to try new things. Survey says. Team Risky Business. Double money, not so much. All right, so Team Risky Business, you guys ended on 100 points. Your thoughts on the final answer. Why do you think the audience felt that way?
Because of the vendor community.
Not all. So thoughts?
7 that are not.
The 7 is inspired wishes, but we know the 16 is what happens. From a sort of industry's perspective, we love to see the proof of concept, but that's not what the reality is.
Why is that? So why do you think that's not the case?
Because none of the agencies are the risk averse. They don't want to take any risk. Decisions are made in committee, by committee, so the more paperwork is collected, they can justify whatever risk they want to take.
Reaction.
Well, hold up a second. I mean, that flies directly into we're all being charged startup mentality. Startup mentality. Coke and Doritos go make me this thing, make it work, no budget. Get the young guys to work overnight and make this stuff happen. And yet, we still have the process of RFI, which is toe in the water, then foot in the water, and we work our way up to proof of concept. And we're being told, lean startup mentality. We can't accept that risk. We're not ready for that level of failure, nor are the taxpayers VCs. So be very careful in what we want to do. And believe me, I'm all for lean startup methodologies in certain aspects of government, but we're not ready for that. And the taxpayers aren't ready for it, but the Washington Post is ready for it because they love the big fat. That's what they're after. Whether it's 7 million or 6 billion, they'll write the story and people will be embarrassed and be a political catastrophe for the little projects. And it's a big deal. Your thoughts?
Really? I mean, we'll talk about that one big thing that was on Washington Post, and if they had done a small proof of concept, perhaps we never would have heard about the exchange. So, what happens is, you know, from an industry standpoint, I will say that we do love the opportunity for proof of concepts, because that, you know, if you talk about true partnership and true risk sharing, that gives us the opportunity to work together to really create innovative things. I will say that it's very difficult, I believe, for industry to write in an RFI, given the number of RFIs that we receive, do a quality job of showing you and demonstrating the possible success of one solution versus another. So that's just.
Panelist reaction to that. You go down the row and give us your thoughts on this particular topic.
I think that's a great dialogue. I think sometimes when you're on one side or the other, you think something is the way it should be or not. So I think it's good just to have the conversation so you can hear both sides.
I guess, I mean, from the industry's perspective, why don't we go to the agencies and we propose a proof of concept where we are taking all the risk? We will supply everything that they need to test a concept. And they like it, and guess what happens? Then an RFP comes out. So, in a way, I mean, you invest a lot of resources, you take the risk to show them how to innovate, but yet the benefactors can be somebody else.
This is also a good space for the ideation challenges. So you can go out with a problem that you're trying to solve, take it back to that problem, go out and look for ideas and ways to solve the problem, and then take the next step of either an acquisition or another challenge, so that's a good incremental step.
Government's changing quickly too. I guess Lena has stepped out, but I mean, we are trying to innovate by bringing in-house entrepreneurs that can help us to take that first step that we can then evolve. And we've had some success doing that as well, where we come up with some initial ideas from Presidential Innovation Fellows and other innovators who may come into government for a short time, and then we can take those concepts to the next level.
Closing thought?
Not too much to add beyond that. I think some of what we're seeing with 18F and other efforts to try and actually, we shouldn't have to go through a long RFI process and read a bunch of things to come up with a good idea. There are good ideas that are in government as well, and if we set up our programs the right way and where we can talk to industry, we can actually have good dialogue with them rather than have to go through something that's more formal like an RFI. That of course requires having some partners in other parts of the agency who are willing to allow it, and I think we see that, as we certainly learned from the last panel, unevenly applied across different agencies. But there are models that are in place, processes that we have today that we can take advantage of to do that.
There isn't really much more to be said. I mean, these guys are really good. But the true spirit of government, I will come up with something. That the proof of concept is a staged process. So typically the government will go in there and we'll think about a problem or an issue and we'll try to solve it. But I do think the RFI process is very important because you've started with something with limited knowledge of the possible solutions. And then when you go out to the industry, and sometimes it works to your advantage or disadvantage, and you say, hey, this is what we're thinking, now you take it to the next level, I can see the both of them working well together. So, I agree with all these guys. It's a great tool to have, and we're excited about it.
Thank you. So I'm hearing a lot of really interesting ideas of identifying issues that we're all struggling with in terms of how government generates innovation and takes those risks, and how and if and when industry can play into that. The previous question talking about security concerns, I think there's a potential there to think about. I'm not well versed in this, but I can say enough to say, a standard set of questions that need to be answered when you're looking to do something risky that relate to your CISO, or something so that we can educate people like our CISO or other groups that we need to confer with first. So there's some kind of process. So it's not always like, oh, you want to do what? Oh, great news, should change, And it's like, oh, okay, you've got an idea. I have a process. I've been instructed on how to handle that. Now that's just a thought, but all of these things that I just mentioned are things that would be wonderful to discuss in the 3:15 session related to risk. So I'm just encouraging everybody to stick around because, again, it was mentioned earlier today by Sanjay, but the purpose of that session is not only to prepare the material that one of our lovely government speakers will be presenting tomorrow to the entire conference about what happened here today, but it's also to identify people that want to keep this conversation going and figure out what do we want to keep talking about, what kind of a solution or product could we come up with, and I believe they're going to be offering time at ELC to showcase that. So that's my little plug for the planning committee.
And that is an excellent segue to the fact that you are absolutely right. Right after this session is the Innovation Pod. If you like this dialogue, you want to keep this conversation going, you have the opportunity to go to the pod and collaborate and come up with something to solve these problems. So find something that's a session that's interesting. If you found the session interesting, there's an Innovation Pod to discuss this and come up with something tangible. So encourage you to do that right after this. So with that, I would like to thank Team Risky Business.